When I first came to know about Lost Soul Aside, I was still getting over my disappointment with Final Fantasy 15. So naturally, I was pretty excited to see another game, an indie solo project no less, inspired by what I thought could have been a great game. Over 9 years later, it feels like I'm going through the exact same experience. I think that Lost Soul Aside can be a great action game, but right now it's not. So, where did it all go wrong? Usually, when I'm talking about a game, I always like to talk about the good stuff first because that's what I like to focus on. But sadly, not today. Because most of the glaring issues with Lost Soul Aside are very obvious from the moment you get control of the character. Right off the bat, the frame rate is choppy and unstable on the PS5 on both quality and performance modes. And I don't say that as an FPS snob. I mean, I played Final Fantasy 16 at 30 FPS and I played Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth at 30 FPS too. But here, the frame rate was just too unstable, which makes the starting sections of the game an absolute slog to get through. Another major snag is the camera movement, especially while following the player when not in combat. And I don't think it's just a camera issue because it only happens when you're jogging. No issues while walking and no issues while sprinting either. Which makes me think it's tied to the jogging animation because it looks like Kaiser hops from one foot to the other and the camera hops with him. But it's not like the camera itself is a joy to behold. When you're standing still, the camera will auto-adjust itself behind Kaiser and actively fight your input even when all you want to do is pan around and take in the sights. I mean, really, what is the point of having a good-looking environment when I can't enjoy it without struggling with the camera?
Why are you the way that you are?
Cutscenes and sound design are another problem area. Audio cuts off too abruptly between scenes, and the cutscenes seem to trigger suddenly, cutting off dialogue. I mean, just look at this.
Watch your step, Kate.
And this happens almost every time without fail. And in some cutscenes, the mix is so weird that you can barely hear the dialogue. And then, the movement feels janky as fuck and that makes the platforming suck ass. You can easily get stuck on air like Wile E. Coyote and not in a funny way. Then you have the lifeless voice acting, the weird dialogue and NPC interactions. Frankly, a lot of the game is just very off-putting. That is, until you get through the prologue. Once you make it past the prologue, it's like the game decides to reward you for dealing with all the bullshit. The performance just magically gets better in both performance and quality modes, and from now on, you can pick what kind of experience you want. The trade-offs are obvious. With performance mode, you get 60 FPS but a worse image quality. That includes a lower resolution and more flickering in shadows. Either way, I tried both modes and the game is perfectly playable regardless of the one you pick. And the more you play it, the better it gets, kind of following the Nvidia philosophy.
This is like common sense. The more you buy, the more you save.
The combat system is surprisingly deep and the combos are very satisfying to pull off. Think of it as a less polished version of Final Fantasy 16 or Devil May Cry. So if you like the combat in those games, you'll definitely find a lot to enjoy here. Once you get the Great Sword, you can start playing Tony Hawk. And when you get the Pole Blade, you can also start shooting enemies from a distance. As you unlock more abilities and weapons, you can do some really insane stuff, which I would show you. But the truth is, I kind of suck at this kind of combat. But still, I absolutely love this move where you open with the heavy attack, then follow up with a thrust slash, then a couple of cross slashes into the backstep slash, into the Shadowrun, and finally the Judgment Cut. To me, this was perfection and I spammed the shit out of this combo. And the bosses are just the cherry on top. Some of these boss fights are absolute fucking cinema. Like the Rose Queen, who's one of my favorite boss fights in the entire game and wreaks total mayhem on the battlefield. And the final boss of the Aeroflux dimension, whose bullet hell phases made me feel like I was fighting a boss from Nier Automata or even Returnal, both of which are brilliant fucking games. And sadly, my go-to combo didn't work against most of the bosses, but I already told you that I suck at this kind of combat, so what you gonna do? Because ultimately, it doesn't really matter how good or bad you may be at the game, the action in Lost Soul Aside is incredibly fun and the highlight of the entire experience. And that's the thing. Lost Soul Aside feels like a PS3 or an early PS4 era action game with all its kinks and quirks. The janky movement and platforming where you launch yourself like a rocket, the waypoint puzzles where you control arena through the sky, the on-rail sections where you're trying to flee from the Empire that's trying to kill you, the jank-ass controls while sword surfing. Frankly, there's a lot. And if you approach it like an older action game, you'll have no problems with it. But there's also a lot that feels like it just gets in the way of your fun. The best thing about Lost Soul Aside is that it understands what makes the action in an action game enjoyable. It doesn't tack on meaningless RPG systems that don't really add anything to the gameplay. And it doesn't have any pointless side quests that only seem to exist to extend the playtime. The one thing this game does well is combat, and it does that beautifully. Sadly, everything surrounding it is just underwhelming at best and unbearable at worst. Don't get me wrong, I understand that the game had a difficult development period. I get that it started out as a one-man project and only grew in size later on. I don't call this game Temu Final Fantasy to put it down or to make fun of it. Lost Soul Aside clearly has the vision and the sauce. What it lacks is the charm and the depth that comes with the details, the characters, and the world building. And it's not that it doesn't try. You can clearly see the glimpses here and there. The weapon customization is really cool and allows you to add so much stuff to your weapons and pick and choose where each element goes and how it'll look. And not all the writing in the game is bad. I mean, it kind of is, but some of it is the funny kind of bad. You know, the kind we find endearing in a Final Fantasy title. Like this.
Ah, come on. Fire Dragon's an awesome code name.
Or the way Luisa says brother every time.
Brother! I'm just glad to have you back, brother. Don't worry, brother. Learn to become a gifted one, brother. Where are you heading, brother? You're stronger than before, brother.
There were moments where Lord Arena seriously sounded like Grimoire Weiss from New Replicant. I mean, just listen to him.
Arena, my patience with you has worn thin.
My patience with you ran out 1,000 years ago.
And his attitude towards Zana could very well be like Weiss and Kaine.
Wait, that floating fish can talk?
Fish? How dare!
Unfortunately, it all just falls flat because, like most things with Lost Soul Aside, it's just not consistent at all. I feel like if this were a smaller, more focused title with shorter levels and denser combat encounters, it would have worked out much better. Because the fact is, there is a lot of fun to be had here, but that fun is buried under a whole bunch of bullshit, and that is bullshit that, frankly, you should not have to deal with, especially if you're paying full price for the game at launch. So I would suggest you do the same thing that I'm doing, which is put the game aside for now. Wait for the patches, wait for the issues and bugs to get fixed, and then give it a shot. If action is the only thing you want out of a game, you will love this. But if you're looking for a fuller, more well-rounded experience, you might have to look somewhere else because this will leave you wanting, and not in a good way.